and talk about my business because I started it in 2019 and then the pandemic happened and I just haven't really spoken to anyone for a long time. So bear with me, this is my first presentation in a long time. But so I'm Megan, I create treasure now for a living, which is kind of crazy to think about. So I design custom jewellery, mostly engagement rings and wedding rings, and made with ethically sourced natural gems and lab created gems and recycled gold. So yeah, do you want to stick to the next slide? Yeah. So the beginning of the story of the business is, it begins when Johnny proposed to me. So we got engaged in 2017 and Johnny proposed with a placeholder ring and we went shopping together for my engagement ring. And I was buzzing, I was so excited. I didn't know that was a thing that people do, and I've since discovered like loads of people do this. Mostly guys who are like really scared of getting it wrong. I'll just find a little ring and propose. But a lot of people have gone through the process of designing the ring before they propose, or some people propose with placeholder and design together. And I was really excited to do this with Johnny. I've never really spent that much money on jewellery before. It felt like a really symbolic piece of jewellery. I thought it was going to be like a really luxurious, glamorous experience. I was so excited. But then when it actually came down to it,
Ken's going to be your advisor.
Yeah, perfect. But what we actually found was it was a bit more of a perilous quest. So, yeah, it really felt like trying to find buried treasure. We went to like lots of different jewellers and didn't really understand the jewellery world at that time in general. Didn't really know the difference between like a jewellery shop and a bespoke jeweller or an independent jeweller. But we found like just a lot of things that turned us off the process. So we found like really pushy salespeople was like a real turn off. We just found like pricing was really inconsistent. We found it wasn't very transparent. We felt a little bit daunted and overwhelmed, and a lot of people find the same, that the process is supposed to be like this once in a lifetime magical experience, but actually when it comes down to it, it just feels like really challenging rather than really fun. So I founded Teneu to fix that. I was looking for like a business to start, a problem to solve. I kind of got it into my head that I really wanted to start something. And I was working as a design engineer when I was feeling that way. So one thing led to another. I started learning how to make jewellery, and then in 2011 or 2020, 2021 or 2022, I've completely lost track of time the last few years, but I moved into a studio in the city centre. So I was actually supposed to take on a studio in the West End in 2020, the week that like the pandemic started, and that was the week I was supposed to sign a lease, and I had just quit my job to do that. And I was like, oh my god, I don't think I should sign this lease. So I didn't sign the lease, but I still did quit my job, although I did try to get them to take me back. And
They're like, oh, it's a pandemic. No.
Exactly, yeah. So I'm really glad I'm glad that I tried, and I'm glad that I didn't manage to stay, and I'm glad that I'm doing what I'm doing now, but man, what a crazy time to do it, I guess. So, what should the process look like if it's not supposed to be like this perilous quest to get to the perfect engagement ring or wedding ring? The plan is just to keep it like super chill. My idea is just to have a really, really nice time and not have a pushy sales experience. It's just like a really lovely chat with somebody who kind of becomes a friend throughout the process. So, the first step is just to like have a chat. Have either like individual people or couples come in and tell me about them, tell me about their relationship, tell me about what's important to them. Do they have any like sentimental jewellery that they'd like to reuse, or any people in their life that they like to kind of commemorate in their jewellery? Any colours they love, any shapes they love? Just get a feel for their style. And then the next step is to start designing jewellery together. So the first step usually is to find a focal stone. So I work with lots of natural stones like sapphires, or more unusual ones like spinel, or lab-grown gems like lab-grown diamonds, lab-grown sapphire, lab-grown ruby, all sorts. So I usually like bring in a bunch of gemstones and we start working up some designs together, and we just have a nice chat about it. It should be like a really fun process. My aim is to like just listen to what people are hoping for and then like bring that to life, and not to kind of force my own style on people. That's kind of a weird part of, and why it feels a bit weird to think of myself as a creative, because I don't feel like I'm always putting my own creative spin on things, but rather trying to bring out the creativity of my clients and then make that real, which somehow feels a bit more engineering-y to me than creative, but it works out. Could you slip to the next one? Thank you. So then the final step is bringing your ring to life. And this, for me, is like the hard part in a way because I have a lot to do. But I remember this being a really disappointing part of the process when we were going through it. We finally got to a design that I was really excited about, and I was so buzzing to be going through this process of having something made for me. And then it was like radio silence for months, and I just had no idea, like, was it actually happening? Was it getting made? Why was it taking so long? So one thing that I do in this part of the process is just send everybody an update every couple of weeks. It usually takes 6 to 8 weeks to make a piece of jewellery, so every couple of weeks I'm like, hey, here's how it's going. Here's a picture of how your ring's looking. And people love getting an update, and 6 to 8 weeks feels like nothing when you get an update every couple of weeks, but it feels like an eternity when you're like, have they forgotten about me? So, next slide. So that like little step of sending an email every couple of weeks to let people know how their project is going is super easy to do when you've just got one ring to make at a time. But if you were to make more than one ring at a time, maybe like 2 rings at a time or 3 rings at a time, I usually have about 50 projects on the go at once at the moment, and I need to get to higher than that. So the trick is like how to keep giving everyone like a super individual, personal, one-to-one experience when you're giving that same experience to like 50 people all at once and making it feel really special. So the trick to that is to be very organised. And the key is to figure out what you need to create and where it needs to live. That's what I've found as being the main thing to make it possible. So for every ring, there's so much more to it. You've got to send a bunch of emails, even just to get somebody booked in for your first chat. They email you, you email them back, you invite them in, they book in, you confirm the email, the appointment, you reconfirm the appointment the day before so that they definitely show up. You usually follow up after the appointment. That's just the first appointment. There's like 6 emails there already. Notes that you keep about someone. Actually, if you want to skip to the next slide, I expanded these out when I was and it's not too small to read, but I'll talk you through some of it because this was a really helpful exercise to go through to realise what I need to do and does it all live where I think it lives. So one thing, for example, is notes, or maybe thinking about risk. So these are all just like little pieces of information about a ring. What kind of metal it's supposed to be, what size it's supposed to be, when is it due by. But the consequences of getting those wrong is pretty huge sometimes. So like if I cast something in the wrong metal by mistake, that's all the profit for the job blown. If I got the date wrong, that's someone getting married without a wedding ring, that's kind of stressful. Or proposing without an engagement ring, also stressful. So this sometimes feels like the kind of nuts and bolts of how it all works. Kind of unsexy, unglamorous. All happens in the background, but it has to be done well, and it has to be done right, and it has to be done right for every client. There's no point giving like 20 clients an amazing experience, but then 100 of them a really bad experience. So this has been pretty critical to it all. So please get to the next slide. I have a tip. There's 2 things that have really made all of this possible, and it's both bits of software that I didn't know about when I started, and I wonder if you guys know about it. Does anyone use Notion already? No. Awesome, one Notion user. Love it.
I love Notion.
Yes. Does anyone use Dubsado already? No. Awesome. Cool. Well, maybe you have no need for either of them, but you might find a need for one. Probably Notion is useful for most people. So in Notion, it's kind of like you've got a bunch of databases, and it's kind of like a wiki, like a personal wiki, and you just put everything all in one place, and it all links together, which is amazing. So the trick to all of this is just to keep everything in one place. I've got like 3 places, but so like for example, I get in a selection of gemstones to show a client. There's maybe like 6 gemstones. They might pick one, great, we keep it and we send the rest back, or maybe they didn't like any, so we get a second selection in. But how do I keep track of for 50 clients all at once? Like, what gemstones did they get in? Do I still have them? Do they need to be sent back? Has the client seen them? Are they going back to the customer, to the supplier? Have they gone back to the supplier but I haven't got a refund yet? Like, there's so much. So that all goes into Notion. So in Notion, I only have like 5 pages that I use. And that seems to be the trick to keeping everything organized. It's just like simplify it as far as possible. So I have like one database where I have a record of all my projects, the client's names, when they're due, my tasks, what CAD models I need to do, what quotes I need to prepare. goods in and out, that's one that I use most often day to day. So it's like every casting that comes in and out, every stone setting task that comes in and out, every gemstone, just everything like gets tracked in there. So I know when things are due, have I ordered them? It's so easy to double order something for someone if you don't keep track of it. I also accidentally made a gallery the other day when I was trying to get my Instagram. I basically recreated Instagram inside Notion because I hate posting on Instagram so much that I put it off to the extent that I recreate an entire Instagram inside Notion. But it's actually been really helpful because I didn't have one place that I could show clients at a glance, like, oh, you're thinking about a wedding ring. Here's all the wedding rings I've made. So that all lives in Notion as well. So Notion's great. If you haven't used it, I would totally recommend checking it out. If you've got information that you need to live somewhere, Notion could be a good place for it to live. Dubsado is a bit more specific. It's more like a kind of CRM system, but it's how I send quotations, send my terms and conditions, send an invoice all at once, and then get paid in installments against that invoice. It's also how I automate sending emails to all my clients and just keep track of where everything is. And Dubsado is kind of designed for like creatives, for like lots of wedding photographers use it, for example, or stationers, or like custom artists. I love it. I think it's like the best thing ever. And if you have a need for something like this, if you're looking at this thinking, oh yeah, it is really hard to keep track of all my clients and all my projects, maybe Dubsado's the one for you. So I put a QR code there if you wanted 20% off, because I've got like an affiliate code, but you don't have to use it. Anyway, I thought it'd be helpful. So please feel free to skip on to the next slide. So that's all I was kind of picturing, when Audrey mentioned that the theme was treasure, I was thinking about how a treasured piece of jewellery needs like a treasured experience to go along with it. So that was how I tried to do that. And then the other thing I was thinking about is, like, what's the difference between treasure and loot? What happens when the treasure isn't yours to take? So this is a really hot topic. Ethical sourcing has always been important to me, and it's why I got into this whole thing. And in fact, when we went to visit lots of jewellers, I felt like the questions I was asking about ethical sourcing were, not that they were falling on deaf ears even, but they were kind of being like sidestepped. It was a really uncomfortable topic. Everyone clearly felt really uncomfortable discussing it, and it was just like a bad vibe all around really. So my approach with it is to be super transparent about sourcing and how ethical it is, or how ethical we know it to be. A big part of ethical sourcing is not just where something's come from, but how much you know about where something's come from and how much you can prove. But it is a hot topic. When I first started in 2017 speaking to jewellers and we were asking about lab-grown stones, the response was really negative. A lot of jewellers tried to dissuade us from going for lab-grown stones, but I was already really convinced that that was what I wanted. And even just in the last few years, that's changed so much. And now you'll see lab-grown diamonds in like prime position in like every jeweller's window in our gallery case. So that's like a huge shift that's happened in the last few years. But I think a big failing, I guess, of the conversation around ethical sourcing is that it only really focuses on diamonds. So we all kind of know about problems with natural diamonds, and everyone is debating whether you should go for lab-grown diamonds, which is what all of these are, or natural diamonds. But everyone kind of fails to recognise that you don't have to go for a diamond at all, that there's so many other beautiful gemstones which are ethically sourced. So this, for example, is an Australian sapphire, and there's a few things I like about it which I would say make it treasure rather than loot, which is, we know where they came from. They came from Australia, from Ian and Rod, who mined it, and we know where it got cut, and we know the conditions that it got mined in. We know that people got paid a fair wage for mining it and for cutting it, and then the shape of it is really weird. It's this kind of free-form shape, this really skinny stone, and it's like half blue and half yellow, which I think makes it really cool and unusual, but traditionally, kind of would have been like bad characteristics for a gemstone to have. So being two colours would have been like really unappealing for most of history until now. And then being this kind of freeform shape was unpopular until now. But it's a great way to make the most of the material. If someone's gone to all this effort of mining the material, washing it, cleaning it, and then going to cut it, what a shame if it's just not a popular shape, so it can't get cut, so it can't get sold, so nobody can get paid, so nobody can make any money. Like, it's kind of a shame that all this hard work goes to waste. So just to say that on the topic of ethical sourcing, it's not just natural versus lab-grown diamonds. There's so much more to it than that. So I thought I would dive into like some of the options. If you would like to I don't know, take a more ethical approach to sourcing when it comes to designing fine jewellery. So one area that there's a lot of riches here, I'd say, from trash to treasure. I put trash in quotes because none of this is trash. I feel like it's terrible to call anything trash really, but these are 3 types of gemstones which traditionally kind of would be considered trash and not really used in jewellery, but I find are really popular and really beautiful and would totally recommend. So the first one, another Australian sapphire. It shows up terribly here, but it's like half blue, half yellow, another kind of weird freeform shape.
I'm going to turn off the background so you can see the pictures
Oh,
a
okay.
little better.
So it's, traditionally like not a shape or a colour that would have been chosen, but if you can have like an open mind about the design and fall in love with something that's a bit out of the ordinary, then that also usually means that like there's a good kind of, diversity of the supply chain. It's not just like the big players who kind of get all the business. Like there's a lot of people can make a living here. This is a salt and pepper diamond. Salt and pepper diamonds also have had a bit of a moment the last few years, and a lot of people, like online, you'll see people saying like, oh, it's just a bad quality diamond, and like technically that's true, but they're really beautiful as well. Everyone is different, and some people just love them. Like they're really dark and alluring, and everyone is different. So salt and pepper diamonds are one of those things that used to be considered trash, but are now treasure. I love them. This one here, this is a lab-grown alexandrite, which is kind of an unusual material, and it was precision cut by a lady. She's called Michelle. She's in San Francisco, and by day she's a biomedical engineer, and then by night she cuts gemstones. That's kind of weird. And actually, you'll find that in the gem world, there's quite a lot of I was going to say ex-scientists, but they're still current scientists, but then just by night like to cut gemstones. But that's one aspect that I think is kind of overlooked, which is with lab-grown materials like lab-grown alexandrite, it's not that expensive to buy the material. Not as expensive as it would be for the cutter, for example, to buy like a piece of sapphire from Australia. So that means that with the same budget, you can kind of put your money towards really high-quality workmanship on materials that are kind of less desirable. So, for example, getting a precision-cut gemstone by Michelle is like a big deal in your ring, but it was only really affordable because the material is considered like not traditional, or synthetic materials are considered less desirable. But in my opinion, they're usually like cleaner material, sometimes more beautiful material, more available, and more affordable. So I don't really see what the problem is a lot of the time. Please continue. The other way to turn trash into treasure is to remodel jewellery that you already have into something new. So this was a ring, actually it was like a girl's auntie. She passed away and left her this ring, but she didn't love wearing it. And also it was like really delicate, really vintage, really thin, kind of dangerous to wear every day. So we took the centre stone out and turned it into a new design, which you can see here. And this was a guy whose mother had passed away, and she left her jewellery to the girls of the family, like all of the partners of her sons, which was really sweet. So the girls from the family came in and we turned the rings that they'd been left into 3 stacking rings so they could wear them and remember Gillian, her name was, for forever. So this is like quite a traditional part of being a jeweller. Doing remodeling is not like an innovative thing at all, but a lot of people don't realise it's possible. And even if you do realise it's possible, it can be kind of hard to trust a jeweller or trust anyone with your family heirlooms. Like it can be quite a scary thing to do. So I feel really lucky to get to play this role in people's lives, to be part of making their engagement ring or their wedding ring, but then also making future heirlooms out of the heirlooms that they've been given. Like it's a really, one thing that really tripped me up when I started all of this was feeling like jewellery was frivolous. I came from an engineering background. Nobody wore jewellery day to day. And when I said I was going to make rings, everyone was like, oh, are you making your wee rings? And I was like, oh, this is not at all me. It doesn't feel me at all. So I really kind of like wrestled with that for a long time, feeling like what I was doing was frivolous and what was the point. But then you think about it, like we've made jewellery for thousands of years. Like as long as humans have been around, we've been making jewellery and wearing jewellery and giving jewellery. So it just feels kind of nice to be part of this kind of bizarre element of being human. But I don't know, just feel kind of right as well. To be part of, it's sort of moments, I guess, that people are trying to commemorate rather than, it's not just like super blingy all the time. So, please skip to the last slide. That's me. I hope it was helpful to see like what goes into making a custom ring, what goes into scaling up a business that makes custom things, and yeah, give you some ideas about what you can do with materials or jewellery that you didn't know was possible before, hopefully. So, thank you very much.
That's great. I think we have time for maybe like one question. If anybody has any questions for Megan.
I have so many. But the main one is, do you have a favourite stone?
Yeah, good question. 2 for me, sapphire and lab alexandrite. So sapphire I think is great because everyone kind of knows about blue sapphire, but sapphire comes in like pretty much every colour except grey. I really wish sapphire came in grey. But you get like pink, orange, purple, blue, green, yellow, everything. So I think sapphire is like an underrated gemstone. And it's also super hard, which is why I like to use it for jewellery. There's a lot of gemstones, like I'm wearing sunstone here. I love it. It's got these like little copper platelets inside, so it shimmers. It's really beautiful, but it's really soft, so you can use it in a ring, but it's going to get all destroyed over time. So sapphire I love because it's beautiful and hard. Lab alexandrite, because it changes colour. So in some lights it looks kind of greeny, blue, teal colour, but then in other light, like candlelight, it kind of goes like red or purple. And when you try and take a picture of it, it looks blue to your eyes, but you take a picture and it looks red. It's like super weird. And alexandrite, as a naturally occurring material, is crazy expensive, like more expensive than diamond, and it only really comes from Russia, so it's off the cards 100% for most people. Alexandrite is just not a thing that you'd have in your jewellery, at least not nice quality, but you can make it in a lab. In fact, I'm wearing it just now, so they started making alexandrite in the lab to use in lasers, as like a laser rod, so they make it really, really pure for that purpose, and then if they get the doping slightly wrong and it doesn't laze, that material would go to waste, except gem cutters hang around on little Facebook groups. There's some guy from the lab, and he's got some to get rid of. So it's so fascinating to see how this material works its way through the supply chain. So yeah, somebody will chop it up into little chunks, and somebody else will be like, I want chunk G, please. Yeah, so lab-created alexandrite is super high quality, super affordable, and it usually means that you get to work with like an independent cutter who's just dead buzzing to be cutting the material and not usually doing it for money, but doing it for love. So it's really cool.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Megan. That was fantastic.